That is one of my favorite songs. I've been listening to it all day long. It's so good to see you all again. And I'm so happy to be here with all of my co-presenters. My name is Joe Lurie. I am a product manager on the Intune customer acceleration team, customer experience team. I am literally the least important person in this room. So I am going to let my colleagues and my co-hosts introduce themselves. I see them in a specific order. I hope Matt's first because that's the way I see them, from Matt down. So Matt.
Always good to be top of the stack, Joe. Thanks for kicking off the introductions. My name's Matt Call. I'm on the Microsoft Intune engineering team, and I'm responsible for Windows security. And more importantly, for this session, as it pertains to the Intune suite, I'm responsible for endpoint privilege management and the features we build around that product set.
Thanks, Matt.
Hi, folks. I'm Dilip Radhakrishnan. I'm a partner group product manager with the Microsoft Intune team. I'm responsible for the Intune suite offering from Microsoft, in addition to leading the security team within Microsoft Intune.
Thanks, Dilip. Lavanya.
Hey everyone, I'm Lavanya. I am the principal product manager with Microsoft Intune team, and I am responsible for AI-driven analytics, and I work with all these awesome people here on the call. And I am looking forward to being that meaty patty in the burger because Matt said he's the top of the stack. I said, okay, let's bring in something interesting into the conversation. So yeah, look forward to chatting with you all. Danny.
And Danny.
Hey, I'm Danny Guillory, Senior Product Manager in the Intune engineering team, and I'm responsible for advanced app management.
Thanks, Danny. And what's cool about this is if you've been with us all day today, you've already seen Dilip this morning talking about the unpacking the Intune suite. And then you probably saw Matt talking about EPM and Lavanya talking about advanced endpoint analytics. And Danny, you just got off the video with Danny talking about advanced app management. And so we're so happy that you're all here with us today. And that you've joined us all day today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. I have a question that's already come into our tech community, so please feel free, type in your questions. I'll read them live if I can, and we'll answer them live right here in the video. So I have a question that came in from Paul for Danny. How does app management deal with installations that require a reboot? We don't want a bunch of angry end users whose devices rebooted in the middle of a call because an application update got installed.
So you'll be able to control basically the rebooting behavior today, the same way you have today with, I think there are the numbers that call them back after the application has been installed. So after you install the application, there's a number that comes back. I forget what that number is, but it basically is a number of did the app install? Did it require a reboot? So you'll be able to code that in and figure out, hey, if it comes back with 1603 or something like that, then hey, don't reboot, soft reboot later, something like that. So the app will still install, and you'll be able to the return codes. You'll be able to figure out what you want to happen for those particular return codes.
Thanks, Danny. And for people that may have missed the last session where you're just talking, do you want to talk a little bit about advanced app management while we're waiting for more questions to come in?
Yeah, sure. So advanced app management is basically a solution that we're going to start with bringing you an enterprise catalog. So I thought this was pretty important because today, when you talk to customers, they download the app, they download the tool, they wrap the app with the tool, they upload the app, they realize they need to change the command, they upload the app, rewrap the app, re-upload the app. That becomes like really daunting. And
I've done that many times. Go ahead.
It becomes really daunting and just really gets annoying. So with the enterprise catalog, you'll literally just be able to type the name of the application you want. That application, you'll see it. You'll continue on through the wizard, and then the application just winds up in your tenant. Then you can go change command lines. You can basically do all the things you do today. We're going to basically pre-package all that for you, just drop it in your tenant. So also one of the things I thought about last week was the customers that have these apps that are very large, like 8 gigs or more apps. Intune, I think there's a limit of 8 gigs for the upload. Well, if the app's 10 gigs or whatever, as long as you get it from the enterprise catalog, it'll just show up in your tenant. So quicker way to get the app in your tenant, and then you can go through all the same controls you have today for rolling out, testing, deploy to a small group, like same controls you got today. We're just going to make the acquisition of the app a lot easier for you.
Thanks, Danny. Throughout and this question is going to be for Dilip. Throughout the last several hours today, as we're talking about Intune and the Intune suite and all the benefits of the Intune suite, one of the things we talk about is really consolidation and consolidating the number of tools that we use on a day-to-day basis as IT admins, as IT pros, as desktop admins. We have a question from Ryan that came in. What about on-prem server management? When is that coming to Intune? And so that we can consolidate and reduce, per your comments at the beginning, Dilip, by no longer needing configuration manager and just put everything into Intune.
It's a great question. So what happened is, as a part of the focus that Microsoft had with Intune being focused on devices, we were focused on information worker devices primarily, right? So the worker devices, your PCs, your mobile devices, your Macs, your Linux devices that are on the desktop. There was a whole strategy from Microsoft where we did the move to Azure, and there's Azure management tools that are primarily used for server management. So that's where you use Azure Arc and the set of tools that are used for server management traditionally. So that puts our customers in an interesting situation. Like for some of the SCCM customers, then your choice is, are you keeping your servers on-prem, or are you moving to the cloud? So if you're moving those workloads eventually to the cloud, hosting it in your own data center or at the Azure data center, then the Azure tools, the DevOps tools are better suited for doing server management. But having said that, we also support a use case where we have our customers using a single pane of glass for doing security on servers along with their endpoints. So our integration of Intune with Defender, we have a single pane of glass for managing all your security settings, whether they are on your desktop or on your servers through Intune. So that's the scope of where we have defined the boundary around server management with Intune. But we are definitely open to feedback from customers. Like we're constantly revisiting our strategy to see if this model works, or we need to revisit and enhance the capabilities that we offer with server management with Intune.
And what would be the best way to give that feedback? Is it in console feedback that you're looking for, or maybe aka.ms Intune feedback? We can put that on the scroll in the bottom. What's the best way for that feedback?
Yeah, I think through these forums, as well as if you're part of our if you're working through our CAT customers, customer acceleration team, adoption teams, so they would be a great source to also provide that feedback.
Thanks, Dilip. Matt, did you want to expand on that answer a little bit as well?
I think, Dilip being my boss, he said all the right things, right? But no, I think it's probably important to call out, for those of you who are dealing with server management and that sort of stuff, remember that server management has historically been between 5 and 10 years behind desktop management, right? Like whatever we do on desktops or on endpoints, information worker endpoints, that trend tends to hit servers a bit later. So I think like right now, like Dilip said, we support servers in various ways in Intune, like with Defender and through like our tenant attached scenarios with configuration manager. And I think, over the next 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to see server management change a bit. And you're already starting to see that with tools in market like Azure Arc and others. So like Dilip said, we really need your feedback to make sure that we make the right decisions about server management moving forward and solve all the right problems.
Thanks, Matt. And while I have you, we have a question from Samuel that came in for you. And it's about endpoint privilege management, of course. And he wants to know, how can we revoke elevation rights quickly in EPM? We plan to use EPM, endpoint privilege management, for our users to get temporary rights to elevate access on their local clients via my access packages.
Yeah, so there's a lot to sort of unpack there. So let me just sort of repeat back what I think the question is. The question is, hey, I want to be able to remove admin rights quickly from end users who don't need them anymore when I've given them out temporarily. So for our solution, the way that we've architected EPM sort of has two, I would say, foundational capability layers. The first one is in public preview now, and that's around creating a rule set that allows sort of elevation over time. So in that sort of rule set, what you would do is you would create things like saying like, hey, apps from this publisher or apps, this specific app or this specific installer or whatever is allowed to elevate on a sort of a permanent basis, right? So that would be like for long-standing elevations. We have a second piece of foundational capability that's going to come shortly after we GA the first, and GA for that first date is in April, so very shortly.
GA, general availability.
Generally availability. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, general availability in April. We'll introduce a new set of capability around support approved elevations, and that sort of leans more towards, I think, where the question's going is, hey, I have a user who's requested to run an app for a very short period of time, maybe to get back from a broken state to a good state, right? How do I revoke that if like maybe my admins got a little bit too happy in the console and clicked approve a bunch of times? And that's all part of our design. You'll be able to basically immediately expire rules, hopefully in our support approved flow. Then you'll have control over who has the rights to approve. So that way, hopefully you lower that blast radius, right? Because, we don't want to build a product where every admin in your enterprise can approve every elevation. We want to give you the right role-based access controls that you're used to in Intune, sort of govern who can approve this and what's the scope of that approval. So I think there's a lot more to come in the future on, the whole EPM and temporary elevation. So stay tuned. And like Dilip said, if you're working with Microsoft, either through the account teams or through your customer acceleration teams like Joe's on, or you can just, find us on Twitter, whatever works. Like, the only bad piece of feedback is feedback we don't hear. So please be vocal and loud. Like, we want to make sure we get that feedback and build the right thing. And there's a great link here on the screen that just magically appeared. Intune feedback's a great place as well to maybe get feedback to us. So that's great. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Matt. And Lavanya, thank you for your patience. We have a question for you from Gabriel about advanced endpoint analytics. Advanced endpoint analytics seems to only, actually the questions about endpoint analytics seems to apply only to Windows devices, as I understand it. Are there any plans to eventually include other variants such as Mac OS, Linux, Android, iOS, iPadOS, Mac OS, all the other variants?
Sure, and that's a great question. As we are thinking about our advanced endpoint analytics and endpoint analytics as a whole, one of the strategies moving forward is to be cross-platform availability, and I think that's an important area. So the way we are thinking about it is features that's kind of applicable across other platforms. How do we ensure we are able to provide that capabilities? How we are thinking about it. So Gabriel, if there is a specific feature in endpoint analytics that kind of resonates and you're looking for cross-platform support, send us more details and we would be happy to chat more about it and understand the use case and have that considered as we think about the product features.
Cool. Hey, Joe, just to add to what Lavanya said, not just the analytics, the entire Intune suite, all capabilities where relevant, we'll be supporting cross-platform. Right. So the number one thing we shipped was remote help. We shipped it first on Windows because that's where most pain point was felt by our customers. But we have a version in preview with Android. We have work happening on Mac support with remote help. Same thing with application updates, right? So that Danny's team is talking about. Or that'll eventually be Mac, Linux, all operating systems that we support app deployments on. Same thing with endpoint privilege management. We start with Windows. There's a lot of customer interest in having similar capabilities on Mac. So we should step back and look at Intune Suite. Our goal is to be cross-plat with every capability where applicable.
Thanks for that clarity. And one thing that I want to clarify also is you said we'll start with Windows. We started with Windows. We'll start with Windows. We don't always start with Windows. In this case, Tunnel for MAM as an example, iOS, right, Android. So it's not always starting with Windows. Just these three we happen to have started with Windows for. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Lavanya. We have a question from Tyler, and this is also for Lavanya. It's regarding proactive remediations. Could I get some clarity on whether the ability to run a proactive remediation on Windows endpoint will be part of the advanced endpoint analytics feature set, or whether it will be part of Intune Plan 1? So I'm going to answer first. So, just say, proactive remediations is part of Intune Plan 1. There's some other requirements, Windows Enterprise. So I think, Tyler, your question is more about on-demand remediation. So I'm going to let Lavanya talk about on-demand remediations as part of the Intune suite.
Yeah, so on-demand remediation currently at the moment is kind of with our business planning and marketing team, and they are figuring out more of the detailed logistics to figure out whether it will be part of the Plan One or it will be part of the Intune suite. I do not have more details to share yet, Joey. This is more for Tyler, but I think as soon as we have that information, it'll be more available in our external-facing blog post.
All right, thanks, Lavanya. So, Danny, this is funny. The question that Wolfgang is asking, this is a question that I know you and I have had a lot of conversations with a lot of different communities within Microsoft, and this question always comes up. You showed an Android APK example on your advanced app management slide. Is there a story behind that by integrating other platforms?
I mean, alluding more to what Dilip said, we are looking at other platforms. Not right now. We're starting at Windows, but there will be eventually when we can start investigating more and peeling that onion back on other platforms. We have some capabilities. We just focusing on Windows right now, really nailing that experience, and then we'll look at some other platforms, whether it be Android, Mac. What's next? I really can't tell you. We haven't really discussed a lot, especially with business planning on what we're going to do next. We do know we will work on other platforms, just not right now.
Yeah, that slide is more like just an Easter egg to see who's paying
I
attention.
need to just take that out. I just need to find a blank that out.
Yeah, it's just to see who's paying attention during the meetings.
It's good. I'm glad people are catching it, though.
Dilip, you had mentioned remote help, and I do see a question in the tech community about remote help. And I think this is something that was a requirement in the beginning of remote help. It has since changed. So one of the question that I see that I just lost, the question was, can you provide some you talked about pain points with remote help. So talk about the current pain points and why we should adopt remote help. But specifically, the question that I was just alluding to is, why does a full control sharer, why are they required to log out of their device on disconnect? And I think that was in the beginning, but that's no longer the case. Yeah, so you can correct me on that. But so what are some of the pain points? Why should they adopt remote help? And do we have an ETA for unattended remote help?
Okay, great set of questions. So let me unpack a few things. So remote help, most of the customers initially come at it as, hey, I need a tool for my IT help desk to remotely connect and troubleshoot devices, right? And that's been a historical requirement all along. But what changed was a few things. One, the devices are no longer just all domain joined. They're all over the globe, anywhere. And there are different types of devices, not just PCs. It's PCs, Android tablets. There are devices sitting on oil rigs remotely, or unattended devices. So those are the new use cases that are there for frontline workers and other use cases. And then the third set of thing is, this is a different world we live in, right? So it's not just an IT capability, but all the security aspects of remote help. Because it's not just kids in garages that are hackers. Now you have like nation states with cyber armies trying to go after assets. And what better asset than if you can compromise somebody's remote help instance, then you have keys to the kingdom. You can pretty much do anything on the customer's network. So those are the aspects with which when we wrote remote help, we rewrote it completely ground up as a cloud service that can work cross-plat with all these capabilities. So security was one of the most important things we did. We want to establish trust between the IT team that's offering the help and then the end user who's being offered to help. So when both sides need to first trust each other. So we did a lot of Azure AD integration. And we also did a lot of security context, like making sure that it's running in the right privileges. And these applications that we built for remote help pass all pen tests and are constantly validated for security threats. So keeping all those in mind, so within a session, when a help session is on using remote help, we want to make sure that anytime an admin is elevating his privilege, providing credentials to say run a script or do some troubleshooting, at the end of the session, we don't cache those credentials anymore. So that was one of the reasons the early implementations of remote help, we forced a logout. But we have a much more elegant solution now. We don't force that logout to happen anymore, but at the same time, we don't keep the credentials on the session any longer than needed at the end of the session.
Thanks, Dilip. And thanks for that explanation again. That's what I thought it was in the beginning, and then it's matured since then. So I have a question from Simon for Danny, and it's about app update management. If a custom changed the deployment settings for managed app, e.g., reboot behavior, will that follow through into the subsequent updates of the application, or something that would need to be manually changed for each update deployment? So, if the original app has a reboot something, each subsequent update.
Yeah, that it really all determines on the next update of the application. So if you saw the previous video before this, you'll notice that a part of the update experience with advanced apps is that you'll be thrown into basically supersedence. So whatever controls that application has for that upgrade experience, the system will follow basically exactly what it does today. So if you chose to remove the old version, install over install over the old version, all of those controls will still be available to you, but we are not changing anything that the vendor does inside the application. So if the vendor says it's a reboot, you probably need to go put that return code in there and determine if you want it to reboot, not reboot, basically make sure that you figure out what those reboot controls are, because if there is a new message, then you're probably going to get that reboot. You just basically want to be aware of it.
It's a good point you bring up about we're not altering what the vendor does, and we've talked about this as well, where some vendors say when I install V1 over or whatever V2 over V1, it goes on top, and some say you're going to run them side by side, and we're not changing that either. We're doing exactly what the vendor does.
Yeah, we'll do whatever the vendor says. We're not changing any of their behavior. So, essentially, exactly whatever you do today to figure that out, whether you download the app, deploy it, or test it, hopefully that's what you're doing. All those updates for those applications, just be aware of what they're doing for the upgrade process. That way you can manage your end user experience.
Thanks so much. And Matt, I have a question for you from Yusuf, who's asking about LAPS. Local admin password solution. So LAPS versus EPM. I have Microsoft LAPS. Why do I need EPM? And what are the advantages of one over the other?
Yeah, great question. That's a question we answer quite frequently. So, Microsoft is investing in both spaces, of course. We have LAPS. We'll be releasing, I think, Cloud LAPS here shortly. I don't know the exact date or the one I'm supposed to say publicly, so I won't say it now. So yeah, I know that we're investing in both spaces. I think it's really important to separate the two technologies out. Over the years, LAPS has been used as sort of a supplemental for giving somebody temporary admin privileges. From the Microsoft perspective, I don't know if that was ever the intended case. LAPS goal or its purpose in the enterprise space is to manage and rotate the passwords of local accounts. And what ended up happening in a lot of organizations out of necessity is we started giving out these admin passwords to end users so they could install a driver, install, whatever, right? Problem with this is when you give out these passwords to these end users, they have full unfettered admin access on the device, which means, from a malware perspective, the gate's kind of open. This is a tactic we call persistence, right? In the malware world, right? So you don't want your end users to be able to persist admin for long periods of time on a device. So you either need to have compensating controls for this sort of scenario from LAPS, like strict admin group management, things like that. So there's different ways that you can use LAPS to potentially give people temporary admin privileges, but the attack surface and sort of the risk vector is much larger because you have to have all these compensating controls to make sure they don't persist as admin for a long period of time. For EPM, you sort of come at it from the other direction. What you say is, I don't want the end users to ever be an admin. So the end user's account is never an admin. But what I do want to do is I do want to allow certain things to be elevated to admin from these standard user profiles or from these standard user sort of sessions and scenarios. So what this means is I don't have to sort of implement all those compensating controls for giving out a highly privileged credential. What I can do is I can just allow just the things that I trust to elevate to admin, and everything else is enforced at standard user level, right? So the risk surface becomes a lot more manageable from that perspective. LAPS still has a place in the enterprise. Every Windows device on the face of the earth has an admin account. You're never going to be able to get rid of it. It's built into Windows, right? And you need to manage that account so that way you can manage that sort of threat vector, right? But what we want to make sure that you do is that you don't give out highly privileged credentials or overshare highly privileged credentials that can lead to lateral attacks, right? And that's sort of that's the whole basis for our support approved scenario that's pending release this coming summer in the Northern Hemisphere, winter in the Southern Hemisphere, right? In the July-ish timeframe is like, hey, we don't want you to ever give out a highly privileged credential and cache it on a device. We want that sort of elevation to need to be approved. And once it's approved, the end user uses their credentials to complete it. So you have the auditing trail, you have sort of the silo of privilege escalation, right? It's only that app on that device for that user for a period of time. And you can, sleep easy knowing that, you're a little bit less vulnerable. Your attack surface is a little bit smaller. So that was a really long-winded answer. Maybe it answered the question, maybe it didn't. But that's sort of how we think about those two products sort of working together or in harmony.
Thanks, Matt. We have a question I'm going to throw over to Dilip first, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I feel like the licenses for Intune features are not grouped together. How do I get EPM, endpoint analytics, and advanced app management all in one place?
Okay. So you get a choice here. So each of these features that we have as a part of Intune Suite can be purchased standalone, or as we would recommend, like by bundling it as a suite, obviously has significant benefits in terms of the overall pricing and discounting that happens with typical Microsoft Suite products, right? So these are all, again, available. So if you go into the Intune product console, there is a hub. You can do a trial and also purchase licenses. But if you work with our account teams and are buying bulk licenses through our account teams, then that's the volume purchase program, and you again get licenses allocated as part of that, right? So to answer your question, Joe, it is available as standalone components. You can just buy what you need or buy the full suite and get the benefit of the entire suite.
All right, thanks, Dilip, thanks for explaining that. And we have a link we'll put up to show our Intune pricing. There it is. If you go to our Intune pricing, you can see the Plan 1, Plan 2, and the Intune Suite prices and what's available in each one of those. And thanks for my producers for putting that up. And we have a question from Walker, and I believe this one's going to be for Danny. When a security update is released for a third-party software, how long does it take to ingest that into advanced app management, into the catalog?
It's going to take us about 2 weeks. I'm just kidding. No. No, so we haven't actually published SLAs yet, but the updates should be fairly quickly. So we getting live updates and live streams from our catalog, basically. So when metadata changes, we can basically do some comparisons against your tenant and then what we have in the metadata to say, hey, look, you got an update. So you'll be fairly proactively aware of those update apps that need updated versus reactively the security guy catching you as you get out your car, trying to get your coffee, saying, hey, go update this right now. So you'll be able to see that proactively in the console fairly quickly. I won't put out a time because we don't really know right now, but it'll be fairly quickly, more defined once we actually publish documentation and stuff.
And part of that, just so I'm clear as well, is the software vendor releases an update. It doesn't immediately go into the catalog for all of the tenants, right? We're going to do our own due diligence, run MDE checks on that. Anything? We just assume it's good?
No, of course, yeah. We'll definitely do some checks and balances. We make sure that the data's signed, make sure it's not suspicious in any way. If it's suspicious, that we'll basically be holding those things back and doing further investigation. But things that are suspicious won't make the list. Things that are dare I say been through some checks and balances, right? Those will make the list for sure. That does not mean that you shouldn't do your own checks and balances, right? Just because Microsoft's doing some checks and balances doesn't mean that you should say, hey, just go and trust this. Microsoft gave it to us. That would be I think that would be a pretty bad on any customer standpoint. You don't go get anything without trust but verify, right? So continue to do your own diligence, make sure it meets your standards, your requirements, and then go forward and make life easier.
Great, thanks. And Lavanya, was there more?
No, just to add, and I'm sure Danny covered this in his breakout session as well, right? So there are two use cases when you do the application updates. One is when there are security vulnerabilities in third-party apps. Typically, your Defender or your vulnerability management system would have alerted to you, and then you come into Intune, and now there's a ready-made catalog of that application and good to go. But the other scenario that Danny also probably talked about in his session is what we refer to as the evergreen apps, right? So there may not be a security update. There's just probably a new version of the application that was published with some new capabilities. And what we do in the Intune console, we will alert you to the fact that, hey, there is this new version available for you to go and deploy, right? So we support both use cases, one that are just the security vulnerability-driven application updates, as well as the second use case, which is just keeping your apps up to date and evergreen.
Good job, Dilip.
And I have a question for Lavanya, and I think I remember this question came up in your breakout session as well. What's the maximum number of devices we can get in an endpoint analytics score for across our managed devices? And roughly how long does it take for that data to come through?
And Joey, you can keep me honest here. We necessarily do not have a cap on the maximum number of devices in Intune. I hope I'm quoting that right. But in context of how long does it take to see the data, it kind of depends. If, let's say, it's something related to stop error restarts and we are doing analytics around it, it could but if it is related to app crash or app hang, it might take longer depending on the inferences we are trying to derive behind the scenes. So I think it's very subjective, but we do have all of these details shared as part of our documentation. And if there are more specifics, I'm happy to answer those.
Thanks. And to your earlier point, there very well may be a ceiling to how many devices can be in a tenant, but we have customers with more than 1 million. So even if there is a ceiling, it's more than 1 million. So most of our customers should fall well below that threshold. So Matt, I have a very long question here for you. I hope you've been looking at it while we were talking with Lavanya and Dilip before that. Well, this question is coming in from, I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Shamili, and it's about troubleshooting EPM. They're testing EPM on a few machines, and when they have a specific setting, send data to Microsoft selected, it's not working. So the settings policy isn't deploying. And the error mentioned allowed device health monitoring error, but those settings are correctly deployed via config profiles. Can't find anything in the logs. What's the best place to start troubleshooting EPM, and how's our support working? It's in public preview today. What's support like for EPM?
Sure. So you should take a quick look if you haven't already. I put a link down here on the bottom of the screen. It's down here somewhere. You should take a look at Intune EPM docs. There's a page in there called deployment considerations. You should read that and you should understand sort of what are some things you need to be aware of when you're deploying EPM. So our support for this is just like every other Intune feature that's in public preview. We support it for use in production environments, like, call our support team, open up tickets, they're ready. I talk with the support team at least once a day on, the volume that they're seeing, if they're seeing any trends, that sort of stuff. Our ears to the ground here. We want to make sure that customers aren't struggling to try out, features that we deliver, and our support team is on board with us and we're ready. So support experience, you're good. Open up a support case. You can do that right through the Intune console. There's at least probably 5 articles out there from the Intune support team on how to do that. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, reach out to anybody that works for Microsoft to ask them how to do that. Back to your question, your specific question. We get this a lot, and it's covered in the docs as well. The allowed Microsoft or the allowed device health monitoring setting in the client elevation settings policy. So it's getting a little bit of a bad rap. So we're looking at ways to fix that in the future. But essentially, that's the first setting that we send down to the device when you enable EPM, because it controls the data that we use for our usage reportings. So I don't know if anybody would disagree with me that data collection and privacy is like a top concern for every organization. And we want to make sure that that's right before we turn on any sort of EPM components or anything that could be sort of collecting data, right? So that's the first setting. That setting will typically only show one of 2 states, well, 3 states: success, not applicable, or error. If the setting is success, that's exactly what it means. Like, hey, we've configured the data collection policy. If you see the setting as not applicable, that means that you don't meet the requirements for EPM, most notably the client OS versions. We require the March optional updates for all but Windows 11, 22 have to. So it's important that you're on the right client updates. And this is all covered in the docs. And then the last thing here is if you see that in error, most commonly we're seeing that because the device cannot communicate with the endpoints that deliver EPM policy. And that is almost always due to SSL inspection, secure socket layer inspection turned on. And for those of you that aren't aware or don't know, SSL inspection literally breaks over encrypted packets, reads them, and then re-encrypts them. It's a type of appliance, a network appliance that's typically used to inspect traffic as it leaves an organization. We don't support that on the identity layer from the Microsoft perspective. We don't support it for Intune. And what we found is that this new endpoint also needs to be allowed. So that's also covered in the docs. So the important part here is if you're seeing that error, that's 95% probably the reason why. And if that isn't the reason, you're saying, hey, I'm allowed, open up a support case, and it's pretty likely you'll hear from me directly as we work with our support teams to get to the bottom of it.
I think that's a great call out, that people think when they call support, it's just like a big empty bucket, and it's not, especially when it's in preview, that the engineers actually see this feedback and they see these tickets and can help troubleshoot them.
Yeah, they have a direct avenue, especially when a product's new like this, it's coming out. Maybe the support teams don't have the level of knowledge they have on something like app deployment that's been around in Intune for a long period of time. They escalate very quickly to the engineering teams to get the support they need. So yeah, support cases are awesome ways to communicate and to make sure that we can get your needs resolved. And they're readily accessible to any customer who has Intune. So yeah, we include the cost with normal Intune licenses. So please use support. Get the help you need and make sure that you're successful in testing. We love the feedback.
Thanks, Matt. Danny, we have another question about advanced app management. And this is about apps that are deployed through other methods. They're deployed through Configuration Manager, manually deployed. Can we get clarity on advanced app management for apps deployed manually or via Configuration Manager? Can these instances be updated by advanced app management, or does the existing app stack require migration to have apps pushed via advanced app management to continually receive updates?
Yeah, so the apps that you have in Configuration Manager will not benefit from advanced app management. That feature is Intune only. Something you can do or should be able to do is this advanced app management should fully work also for co-managed devices, right? So if you've got co-managed devices, you swung that workload over, devices effectively managed by both. So if you swung the workload over to Intune, that should absolutely work.
If you swing the workload over and deploy the apps through Intune.
And deploy the app from Intune.
That's important.
Because what we're going to be doing, again, is matching your metadata or our metadata against what you have. So if we detect that we have the same detection method, requirements, app, of the few different variables we'll be checking. So if those variables match equal, then yeah, you should be able to update that app with the advanced app management.
Yeah, maybe tag onto that a little bit. Danny, the biggest question I get asked about the app management workload is like, hey, when I move the app management workload from Config Manager to Intune, do I have to move all my apps too? Like, how does that app management workload work?
No, I'm just kidding.
What's Go management, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's lots of, let's say, things you can do. Like if you move the workload from Configuration Manager Intune, you can deploy apps. You should be deploying apps with Intune. But if you rarely really had to go and deploy an app from Configuration Manager, yeah, you could do that too. But your North Star should really just be figuring out how to use Intune to deploy those apps. I get how that sounds, because look, I've been on the other side of hearing it too. But you really should be, if you're interested in being more efficient, more effective, not literally trying to turn every knob and see every knob that we got with the Configuration Manager world, you really should be looking at the Intune world. Like the future should be Intune, especially for the app stack. And if you're bouncing back and forth, I would honestly tell you probably don't really have a clear strategy yet, or maybe you're still testing to figure that stuff out. But yeah, you got options. Good call out, Matt.
Yep, good call out.
Making me sweat a little bit there, dude.
I got the tough question.
Read the script. Read the script.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question that's coming from David, and I love this question, and I hope that someone's listening, besides for you, Matt, that can start documenting this as a feature request. Regarding EPM, are there any immediate plans or any plans to develop a mobile app so admins can reduce the amount of time it takes to allow elevation? I see this as someone's requested elevation. I get an alert on my phone. I can click approve or deny, something like that, as opposed to logging into the admin center. It would be great to be able to assign a security group to the mobile app so we could rotate our on-call team.
Yeah, I'd want to know why your on-call team's required to approve an app installation. It seems like a heavy hammer, but all that aside, our support approved flow, we're designing from the ground up to be able to plug into different sort of orchestration engines, if you will. So some common scenarios we get are around maybe help desk ticket flows, email flows, maybe, other advanced sort of, orchestration flows that might be used to, like, if this, then that, this thing, right? Like, if I get a request, then send an email, send a request, do something. So I don't think that we'll immediately have that when we release support approved, but I want the whole, sort of world to know that we are architecting the way that we build support approved from the ground, knowing that we want to build or make orchestration sort of available, right? So just at a very basic level, basic, with us just shipping support approved, our entire console runs on Microsoft Graph, right? Everybody, I think, knows this. So, like, we're going to build it basically so you could query for open requests and approve them via Graph as a bare minimum. And how we take those sort of API, layers, and then, those are leveraged by customers, and what tools are leveraged in, and what other Microsoft products we build to help you leverage workflows like that potentially in the future. Those will all sort of plug into this framework that we built from the ground up, knowing that, hey, we can't have one group of people that are just responsible for applying or approving apps all day. Like, they'll just quit or something, right? Like, or they won't do the due diligence they need to do. So how do we make sure that, the common business needs we hear, like customers need to be able to have managers approve app installs, right? Like, so Dilip's my manager. So, maybe when I go to install an app on my device, Dilip gets a little approval. He always looks for my approval. So he hits approve real quick and make sure I have the right justification, make sure that happens. So that way I don't need to call the help desk every time, right? Or maybe there's a set of devices like executive devices that I want a certain team to be involved with. Like, these are all things that after we build the foundation to the house, we're going to look at different ways to sort of orchestrate those approvals and sort of those different workflows and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's top of mind for us. I don't know that we'll build a mobile app. I don't know. I'm not a big mobile app developer guy, but I mean, we could build a mobile app. There's no reason why. We have the smartest engineers on the planet. So yeah, that's sort of how we're thinking about these approvals and how those things work. I don't know, Dilip, do you want to add anything else there? Did I cover everything you want to cover? Or
yeah, I think Matt, you covered it really well, right? So we have to think about all these automation use cases, right? This is an example of a use case where an end user wants a self-service, and then suppose he needs this app urgently on a Friday evening and doesn't want to wait till a Monday morning till IT comes and checks their console for notifications. So we've been definitely thinking about these kinds of end user experience triggered workflows, right? So the end user makes a request. It could be for this privilege elevation. It could be for a new application that they want to install that they need permissions, or an app control policy, a WDAC policy getting approved for that particular user. So those are all the use cases that we're actively investigating in terms of what would be the right workflow system that we can plug into.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Dilip. We have a question that's coming in for Danny on advanced app management and removing software. Is there a roadmap for advanced app management to auto-remove unwanted applications in a customer's estate by scanning all the apps in one go and just removing the unwanted software? And I don't think this is just keeping to like maybe something that's installed in Windows 11 by default, but a customer installs TikTok, they install something else. To anything coming to advanced app management to remove unwanted software or unapproved software?
So I like whoever asked this question. It was a really good question. So we have not really planned for that. It's a really good question. It's something we had thought about. It's just something we've thought about. Like, I wouldn't say we've executing on any of that right now. Right now, we're really focused on the managed applications. So kind of alluding to what Matt said previously, right? We're building the foundation for the house. Once the foundation is built, like, we can really go crazy and bring some of these other things in. But right now, is advanced app management going to scan and look for what's on the device and then let you know what needs to be updated? No, not right now. That'll be something maybe later in the future we'll investigate. figure out how we executed on it even farther out. But right now, no, it won't be looking proactively at what's installed and then removing anything. But really good ask. It's definitely something I would love to see on the feedback channel to keep it top of mind and on my plate.
Thanks. And I'm asking you all to keep these questions coming. We have a lot of great questions. And Dilip, I'm going to ask you a question. It's actually slid off my screen, so I hope I remember it. We've been talking a little bit about remote help, but, and I apologize, I don't remember who asked the question, is asking about, will remote help in Intune always revolve around TeamViewer, or will there be something inbred into Intune? And we do have remote help now, so maybe it's our fault for not like really pushing. Remote help's been around for about a year now. You want to talk about how remote help differs than maybe a TeamViewer connector, or how remote help is working with Intune?
Yeah. So with Intune, we have both a platform and a solution. So we have happy to have a very rich ecosystem of partners. Like TeamViewer has been a fantastic partner. There are other products that have also worked really well with Intune. And then Microsoft had its own kind of in-house kind of offerings, right? So we used to have a tool, we still have one called Quick Assist, which was actually meant more for consumer use cases, right? So when you have your parents having some trouble on their PCs and you want to remotely help them out, yeah, the Quick Assist is great, but it was not built for enterprise use cases. So as I mentioned earlier during this call, so we put in a lot of effort in terms of rewriting it from scratch, making it an enterprise-ready product with AAD integration, and then have all the capabilities that we built with Intune, and then make it not just on Windows, but make it work cross-plat with Android, Mac, and iOS. So coming back to, so we do have a first-party offering with remote help. We do support a very rich system of third-party ecosystem of partners. So it ultimately comes to where the customers make the right choice based on their needs and capabilities that they look on the products.
Thanks, Dilip. Danny, I'm going to ask you a question that's not really related to the Intune suite, but maybe you can help with this. I see Walker is asking about, you mentioned co-management, you mentioned moving your app management into Intune, which is where this one comes from. The Intune app model is missing some critical features: uninstall available apps, repair apps, multiple deployment types, blackout periods. What are we doing in Intune? And maybe Dilip, you can help with that as well. What are we doing with Intune to improve that app model so that we do have those blackout periods and you can uninstall apps from Intune?
So those are, I'll say, really good questions and things that we do know about and are aware of. My honest feedback would be, make sure that you're communicating all of those up, because we go through a pretty rigorous prioritization system, right? Not that really anybody should care, that you should definitely still be bringing those things up. If you care about it, be selfish. Like, you should definitely raise it with your account teams, Twitter, however you need to get information to us, get it to us. We take all that feedback into account. We really do. It's really hard conversations internal, what we go build, when we go build, how we go build those things. So I'll tell you, I do sympathize with the gaps we brought up. Totally legit. Make sure that they keep being escalated up to us so that we can evaluate and make sure we prioritize those correctly. I mean, it's just kind of honest truth. There's no like hidden secret, hidden gem. Go talk to this guy and it'll get done. That's not really how it works. It really, we look at the plate, we look at our resources, and figure out what we need to go build based off customer demand. Dilip, add more if you want to.
No, thanks, Danny. And thanks for the questions from who were asked on this forum. I think a few things I want to clarify. From a strategy perspective, we are absolutely committed to the base Intune product. Just because you see Intune Suite and AI doesn't mean like that's where we are focusing. Like, actually a majority of the team is actually working still on the base Intune, what we call Intune Plan 1 product.
Yep.
And that'll continue being the case forever, okay? Because that's the core scenario. And to address the question around app management and why some latencies in seeing some of these features with Intune, while a lot of our customers, when they move to the cloud with Intune and Azure AD, initially they're also doing it in a hybrid model or co-managed model. So they were doing a lot of security, compliance policies, everything in the cloud, but continuing to rely on application management and updates through SCCM. Right? So that hybrid mode was what predominantly was being used, and that's where we were focusing a lot of the application management capabilities. But what you've seen in the last year and a half is a massive move to direct native cloud, as we call it, just with AAD and Intune. Now I just got off from a business trip. I was meeting with customers in Europe and Asia, where we've seen massive migration. There was one customer I ran into with more than 450,000 PCs, all natively managed with AAD and Intune in the cloud. So those kinds of cases are the ones that are driving more adoption of, hey, I want to have all these rich app management capabilities directly from the cloud that I'm used to with SCCM. And as Danny said, we are actively working on making sure those gaps are addressed while adding additional suite capabilities around app patching, third-party app patching, and the updates management that Danny talked about. So the foundation is pretty important, absolutely a top priority for us. So as Danny said, just use the feedback tool. Please make sure that your voice is heard, and we will commit to prioritizing those gaps as well.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Dilip. And it's something you just said, Dilip, was we're prioritizing and those suite capabilities, but not everything we're building is a suite capability. We have monthly releases of Intune that have features that are available just by your Intune P1. So I don't want you all out there thinking everything's part of the suite. It's not. Intune is constantly expanding its feature set as part of the Intune P1 subscription.
Correct.
We have a question, Lavanya. There's a question about endpoint analytics and device scopes. How granular can I get in endpoint analytics with device scopes? Are they predefined, or can I set my own tags?
Great question. And I think this is very important because it kind of tees into the roles and the permissions. So for you to be able to use custom device scopes, behind the scenes, it leverages the Intune scope tags and also the permissions that are needed to create some of these actions, right? Like it's an example. The supported roles that we typically go after is potentially the endpoint security manager as a role, or a read-only operator, or a help desk operator, or a Intune role administrator. Those are like the built-in roles that it leverages. And why this is important is to ensure we have consistency. And as you think about the scope tags and also using the custom device scopes, what ends up happening is you will see not just the scores, but also the insight and recommendations for the specific subset of your enrolled devices. So that way, as you work across your various reports, the view is going to be very consistent. And I'm not sure if this would be helpful, but I just thought I'll mention about it, is the supported reports at this point in time are startup performance, work from anywhere, and application reliability.
Oh, I just got a big fuzzy on my screen, so sorry about that if there was a delay. Thank you, Lavanya. We have the next question, I think for Dilip probably, and it's about the Intune Suite and about MSPs. So the question is, the Intune Suite seems exclusively geared towards the enterprise space. Are there any plans for a version tailored towards the MSP? We're sort of an ad hoc admin IT supplier for our clients. So let's talk about what an MSP is, and then talk about how Intune Suite can help with the MSPs as well.
Yeah. So good question. So managed service providers, definitely they are one of our scale mechanisms, right? So with the enterprise customers, they directly purchase our products and then use it. But if you're a small to medium-sized business and you rely on a managed service provider as your service partner for managing those devices, they are very much on our radar as well. To address the question, while we started building this with an enterprise focus in mind, but the use cases are actually applicable across the board. So we've actually put in a lot of investment in simplifying our experience for a lot of these features like remote help and other things. We have a whole bunch of SMB customers who actually adopted remote help today. So when I look at my telemetry and look at the size of accounts, we are seeing a huge uptake with the SMB business as well. We have also given features like remote help at no licensing cost for education institutions, right? So So while enterprise is probably the most majority of our users, but it doesn't still mean that's the only focus. So we are focusing on frontline workers, we are working on education institutions, we are working on government cloud and SMB MSPs, right? So the products definitely support that kind of a use case. The only question is we have to work with our business planning on, is there a SKU that is specifically targeted for SMB customers, maybe as a part of business premium offering, or something that makes it more attractive to MSP community, is something that we have been discussing, but we don't have anything to announce at this point on that. But the capability themselves are very much applicable for MSPs and SMB businesses.
Thanks, Dilip. We have about 5 minutes left, so I probably have time for one more question. And I'm going to ask this question that Nick asked, and it's actually just scrolled off my screen, so I hope I can remember the question. Let me see if I can find it real fast, because we only have 5 minutes left. It's about specialty devices. We haven't talked a lot about specialty devices, which is part of the Intune P2. If I'm already managing Android and Windows Teams Room devices, I'm already managing my Surface Hubs. Will Intune continue to manage those, or will that require the Intune P2 now to manage the devices I'm already managing? I think Dilip could help with that one. I hope.
I have to get back on the very specific question, like which Teams devices. Like when we did a partnership with a company like RealWare on Android devices, that was a case where, so you have the native Android stack, which Google supports, right? So that is what comes with the base Intune Plan 1. But for certain types of devices, like these RealWare devices and other third-party devices that are different form factors and not running the standard Android SKUs, so we have support that we built with Intune called AOSP, Android Open Source Platform Support. So those are the capabilities that we tagged as specialized devices and then made it available as a part of the Intune P2 offering. So of course, that might have some devices in Teams rooms, or also even HoloLens and other types of specialized devices that might require a P2 license, but it depends on the specific device.
That makes sense. Thanks, Dilip. And I know from my team as well, I talked to customers about this at Surface Hub. There's part of Teams licensing as well that's going to be required for Surface Hub, and that's really outside of what we can talk about here with in this Intune suite. So thank you for that question, Nick. So we have about 3 minutes left. I'd love to get some about 30 seconds from each of you on any parting comments about the day, about the Intune suite, about your, whatever you'd like to say, parting comments. We'll start again with Matt. Oh, Matt, you're muted right now.
Comment of the year.
There we go. I think Joe muted me and then asked for me to speak. It's all nothing but fun and games over here all the time. So, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, we really appreciate feedback. I think that's the biggest thing from us is, we want you, like EPM in particular, or any other security scenario that you have, you should try it out. Give us feedback early and often. The channels that we put up on the screen are good areas. Give us feedback. You can find me on Twitter at Device Deploy. You can give me any feedback you have there. I can tell you the team gets sick of me pulling up tweets in planning meetings and helping prioritize those asks. So, again, the only bad piece of feedback is feedback we don't get. So please help us, help you, help us. I guess I don't know how that works. So yeah, thank you for the feedback and thanks for having us. I really appreciate you guys spending your time with us on the Intune suite.
Yeah, thanks, Dilip. I'm gonna do you last, Lavanya.
Okay.
Thank you, Joey. So I think this was great sessions and a lot of good questions on advanced endpoint analytics. And as we are thinking about AI-driven analytics, please keep sending your feedback on how the device correlation upcoming feature would work for you, and also the current anomalies, which leverages the force statistical model that I've spoken to you all about in my earlier sessions. So I would like to hear more about you. But thank you for this opportunity and keep bringing in the feedback to us. We are all ears to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Lavanya. Danny?
Pile on to what Matt said. Feedback. Like, that's the number one thing. That's probably the most important thing to all of us, to make sure that we hear your voice so we can build the things that you want us to build. Go try. It's sweet.
And I want to say my goodbyes and thank yous. Thank you so much for joining us on day one. We look forward to hosting you on day two tomorrow. Same time, 8 a.m. Pacific. And Dilip, we'll close with you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for the team. And thanks to everybody for joining us on day one today. I mean, it's fantastic to see the kind of response that we are seeing for the Intune Suite launch. We just got off some global sessions that we've done with similar events like this, in person and virtual. The feedback and the excitement around this has been phenomenal. It's been more than 12 years since we had something new to offer from Intune over and beyond the base product that we've been working on for 12 plus years. So fantastic to see that. My only call to action is, if you've not already done this, do download trials of our product, the new capabilities. Try it out. We really think it'll add a lot of value to your IT tools and arsenal in terms of consolidating your tools, making it more secure, increasing your end user experience and the satisfaction from your end users, all while saving costs. So looking forward to a lot of interactions and feedback, and support us on the journey as we go and introduce a lot of new capabilities also coming later this year.
All right. And thank you all to my team, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Right.